Number 3, Spider-Man. Alright, so I think all of you knew this one was coming. I made this the thumbnail for the nominations video for this very reason. I knew when we were going to be talking about all forms of media that the big comic book video game of the year, the one that even with video game reviewers and people who aren't that into Spider-Man to begin with, was a big game and a successful project that a lot of people liked, was going to be a winner and one of the best ofs as voted for by our viewers. That it did so well is not too surprising either. This was a big game and spoke to a lot of people in a way that no Spider-Man game has since the early days of Spider-Man 2 and Ultimate Spider-Man. Two old games that I played back on the GameCube era of video game consoles. Since then, Spider-Man has been in other games, video games that I have mixed feelings on, but weren't terrible per se. You have your Web of Shadows and that sort of thing, and they weren't bad, but they did feel lacking, and more importantly, didn't have that free-roaming ability to swing around New York City with your webs. Well, Spider-Man for the PS4 brings that back in full, and that's the best, undiluted part of this game. Being able to explore not only New York City, but a far more upgraded version of it in terms of the graphics and detail behind the map of the city is a wonderful thing. And the controls have never been better. Everyone talks about the Spider-Man and Ultimate Spider-Man game because the ability to swing around as Spider-Man and do it using fluid and natural video game controls is a wonderful feeling. It's a huge appealing part of the whole aspect of adapting Spider-Man into video game form. It's something that no other media can do, where you actually get to be Spider-Man and get to do the thing about the character that's most fun. Adding into that is a ton of stuff that's also excellent about Peter's life and the cool aspects of his role as Spider-Man. From his work as a scientist and building new gadgets and figuring out sciencey ways to defeat his villains, to the ability to be fighting crime in general, beating up baddies, working with or against the cops, trying to work with his influx public image, and sneaking around bad guys' headquarters and that sort of thing. These are all quintessential elements of Spider-Man's character, and every single major element of that character is in play in this video game. Meanwhile, the story is great, and that's obviously the most critical part of this video. We are, after all, talking about the best stories of last year, and this was one of the better stories being told, I feel. By setting it at a time when Spider-Man had been well established as a hero, thus kind of getting around the whole issue of his origins and that business, since most people at this point are going to be pretty familiar with all of that. And instead we get into the cool parts of Spider-Man, jumping right into the action and dealing with him facing familiar foes and dealing with new threats as well. It's a little weird that while we're doing this, we are also in detail going over the origins of Dr. Octopus, but the new take on Octopus is pretty interesting. In fact, in general, I really like the look and feel of a lot of these characters. They went for a more realistic angle, and while it works better for some of the villains over others, on the whole it looks really good. Otto in particular really stands out as a sort of take on an older version of his character, stepping away from the more Sam Raimi era iteration of Dr. Octopus, but not going into the full-fledged version of his comic book self either. He's sort of in between the various versions of Otto that we've seen over the years, and it makes for a very compelling character. Spider-Man himself is great, done well, and done interestingly with Mary Jane, who's also a big part of this story, as is Miles Morales, and the way they kind of bring him into the story I also really liked too. There's a lot of changes here, especially with Miles and that sort of thing, but the way we went about all of that felt clever and fun. I really liked the idea of us being able to play as Mary Jane and Miles as they are part of this story, and we have small sections with them, and the idea of also losing all of the cool powers of Spider-Man for a brief moment in these tense stealth moments sounds like a really cool idea. But you'll notice I kind of chose my words carefully there, because while I love the web swinging aspects of this game, and that part of the gameplay, the combat and stealth leave a lot to be desired, both of which feel kind of clunky, and then once you get used to them, can be pretty repetitive, and that does make me feel a little ambiguous about the whole thing. Those repetitive aspects of the gameplay and other little issues here and there do hold the game back in certain ways. But not enough for me to outright hate this game, far from it. In fact, I really do enjoy the sincere amount of effort and love and care put into it. They didn't go for a lot of obvious comic book references and characters. They went for some pretty cool ones instead. I like the fact that Mr. Negative's a huge part of this game and Venom isn't. Not that there's anything against Venom, it just leaves a lot of room for other cool stuff in the future, while also clearly paying attention to some of the less obvious aspects of Spider-Man canon. The other really cool aspect of this is that we're only in the first iteration of the game. The fact that this is part one of a theoretical series of video games has me very excited. Because we really don't need a lot of innovation to make the awesome series out of this going forward. Just a little bit of tweaking here and there. New York City looks so good it really just needs to be added to, not altered or redone in any meaningful way. So what they should focus on is just polishing things. Adding new villains, new characters, new stories, new ideas, finding ways to tweak the combat and stealth to make them a little more interesting and a little less Arkham-y. And once all of that is done, we're gonna have a perfect series of Spider-Man video games. This is the first iteration of a character that hadn't been adapted properly in video game form in some time, and they had to basically start from scratch. There's a lot of room to move forward from here, and that's the part that really has me excited. The fact that this game basically sets up Miles Morales' character is very exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing where they go from here. Because the fact that we're focusing, and undoubtedly this is not a coincidence, on characters such as Miles Morales and Otto Octavius seems very telling to me, and the potential for future storylines along the lines of Superior Spider-Man or Spider-Verse seem right there on paper. And I'm very excited to see what the plan is for that going forward. It's a really cool game and you should check it out if you haven't yet and can afford a PS4. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.